King of the Hill, one of the best goddamn cartoons ever, I tell you what. It's also got one hell of a great revival recently. So with the return of the king finally here, we thought it was a good time to take a second look at the residents of Arlen, Texas.
Promise me you won't leave again.
This is every King of the Hill character, good to evil. Talking about dang old spoiler alert, man, you know, been dang old warned, man.
I want to do weird stuff with you.
This first category is for the characters with slates as clean as the clean, burning, energy-efficient propane. These characters are the good. And while it might be partial recency bias, we're going to give the gold medal of good to one of the new characters introduced this season, Bobby's sous chef, Emilio. With Bobby following his dream of being a chef at his own restaurant, of course he needs some good employees to back him up. The one we see the most of is Emilio, a gentle giant with a heart of gold. Acting as Bobby's right-hand man, he's somebody Bobby can depend on as both a worker and a friend, sticking with Bobby through everything from charcoal stick shortages to cultural appropriation allegations to even awkward ex-girlfriend encounters. When Bobby starts to doubt himself in one episode, Emilio is the one who encourages him, saying he's by far the most authentic and talented chef he's worked with. We haven't seen a ton about Emilio yet, but we know that he's respectful, hardworking, and loyal as can be, being a hardworking employee and a sympathetic listening ear as needed. Following Emilio is our pick of the most good character in the original seasons, and surprisingly, it's not Bobby this time. By a very small margin, Luann Platter takes home the silver medal of good. Luann is, for lack of a better term, a total sweetheart. Like Emilio, she constantly treats others with respect and compassion, always believing the best in them no matter the circumstances. Like Bobby, she acts as a foil to Hank, wholeheartedly believing the best in everybody around her, and having that try-everything mindset. While her abusive childhood and possible mental deficiencies can lead to her falling prey to some bad influences, like Reverend Junie Hopper, who convinced her that Halloween was for Satan worshippers, she always comes around at the end of the day, and is often the one who deals a killing blow of kindness to the episode's conflict. Whether it's forcing the Hills to overcome their smoking addictions or being willing to give both her horrible parents a second chance on separate occasions, Luann is one of the most purely good-natured characters in the show. The only thing keeping her from the gold medal is that she can be somewhat materialistic and short-sighted, like the time she took a 15-year-old boy to prom in order to make Lucky jealous. In a close third place position, we have everyone's favorite boy who may or may not be right, Bobby Hill. Man who may or may not be right. As of season 14, Bobby is a 21-year-old who's made a pretty respectable life for himself. He works as the head chef of a German-Japanese sushi restaurant, bringing good food to the people of Dallas and a good boss to all his employees. Like in his childhood years, Bobby is still friendly and open-minded and wears his big heart on his sleeve. While he's had his share of childhood mischief, like kicking every guy in a 50-mile radius in the Nads,
You left yourself open, Dad.
Bobby has grown into a chivalrous and kind-hearted young man. We see this in multiple contexts in the reboot. He's a good friend to Connie and Joseph. When Connie's hospitalized and claims she wants to do weird things to him, Bobby insists that they just talk, knowing that she's under the influence of pain medication. Since Bobby still openly has feelings for her, that's some respectable restraint on his part. Seriously, if it were Joseph, we all know he would have folded in moments. He's also just as loving towards his parents as always. When he learns that Peggy's panic attacks at the MRI stop when he's there, he not only accompanies her, but starts a whole new section of his menu based on her cooking. And when his favorite customer tragically passes away, it spurs Bobby on to bond with his old man while he's still around. We agree with Hank on a lot of other stuff, but when it comes to that boy ain't right, well, we might just have to agree to disagree, I tell you what. That said, we will agree that Bobby deserves a respectful Gluttony Sinner medal for his consistent love of food throughout the series. One time, he wrapped a Twinkie in a bologna, dipped it in orange juice, and hey, where are you going? Hey, man, I'll tell you what, man, talking about dang old Boomhauer coming up next, man. Talking about, man, if I said it once dang old 100 times, man, Boomhauer is a dang old good guy, man. Talking about always there for his neighbors and stuff, man. I'll tell you, man, dang old season 14, I got a dang old girlfriend talking about dang old stepdad figured her little old boy. Boomhauer ain't no saint, but he's a dang old good guy, man. I'll tell you what, man. Speaking of which, while he doesn't have much screen time this season, let's give a quick mention to Luke Jr., Boomhauer's girlfriend's son. He looks up to Boomhauer and wants to be cool like him. Of course, he's failing since he knows full well that Boomhauer would never play soccer, but the kid's trying, darn it. He seems nice enough, just your typical anxiety-riddled kid. Well, aside from the non-alcoholic drinking habits, I mean, that's a new symptom to me. But without further ado, let's talk about the man of the hour, the king of the hill himself, Hank Hill. As you'd probably expect from the series, Hank, at his core, hasn't really changed by season 14. That's not to say he hasn't changed at all, though. While he's still the simple, family and propane-loving man that he's always been, Hank is constantly adapting to the changing world around him. He always meets makes these changes with respect and integrity, though, often acting as a voice of reason in some of the more blatant problems of society. We saw a great example of this in the episode No Hank Left Behind, where he takes his half-brother Good Hank under his wing to one of those alpha male boot camps where he pushes back against the guys' misogynistic rhetoric. Hank is the type of guy who doesn't take any nonsense from people who take advantage of others' vulnerabilities, whether it's sleazy golfers harassing his niece or mentally ill lunatics nearly getting his son killed. He even stood up to his abusive father for talking bad about his mom, showing some serious courage and capability of overcoming some of his own trauma. So why isn't Hank any higher on the list? Well, to put it simply, he isn't always the voice of reason. In fact, sometimes, just like anybody, Hank can be a bit asinine. It's not often, of course. Usually at his worst, he can be a bit strict towards Bobby and a bit overly enabling towards Peggy's antics. In both cases, it comes from a place of love, as does his tendency to bail his extended family and neighbors out of any trouble they might get into. The revival does a great job of showcasing Hank being in a constant state of discomfort with any sort of changes around him. He usually tries to fix those things with good intentions, but ends up learning a bit himself and growing in his own way. And real quick, let's talk about Ladybird, Hank's beloved dog. Given how Ladybird was already pretty darn old during the original seasons, and 8 years have passed, I'm taking a wild guess that the main reason Ladybird isn't mentioned in the show is because she's passed on. She was a good girl though, and we'll miss having her around. Oh shoot, here comes Hank. Change the subject. Hey Hank, we were talking about a butane bastard gas, am I right? All right, let's move on to his neighbor, Connie. Dealing with strict parents, Con Jr. here naturally took college as her opportunity to gain some freedom from them. Bobby's facial reaction to her ethical non-monogamy is pretty much all of us in the audience's reaction. Despite this, she still has a close relationship with them, being one of the few who knows about her parents' divorce before it was public, and according to Min, talking to her over the phone regularly. Connie's also more than happy to reconnect with Bobby, even going as far as to try and set him up with one of her friends so they can hang out more often. Their will they won't they relationship is as interesting as ever, though the internet is split between rooting for them and hoping Bobby grows a bit of a backbone and finds someone better. This Wicked Binge video is sponsored by Strickland Propane and its reliable employees like Roger, Buddha, Sack, Enrique, Joe Jack, and Donna, to name a few. We rank all these four together because they have about the same amount of screen time and character development as each other, which isn't much, but it's enough to show that these four are all decent, hard-working folks who take their jobs seriously. If we had to rank them individually, we'd say Roger, because he showed the most growth and maturity of the bunch, then Enrique for his genuine love for his family, though he loses points for being overly clingy with the Hills, Joe Jack, Joe Jack's there, and finally Donna, who's usually friendly enough if you don't count that one MySpace episode. Unfortunately for her, we do count it, and she loses quite a few points as a result. On the lower end of the good category, we have Hank's mother, Tilly Hill. Tilly's character really begins and ends with Hank's mom. I don't mean to sound like Cotton and say that her only meaningful role in life is that. I just mean that she doesn't get a ton of development throughout the series. She's a loving mother to her son and a polite lady in general, often to the point of not knowing when to stick up for herself, granted. This is likely due to the abuse she suffered from Cotton, which led her to often losing herself in hobbies like glass figurine collections, neglecting her son in the process. She's certainly the better of Hank's parents though, and while it doesn't take much, Hank turned out pretty alright regardless. And since Cotton definitely doesn't get any credit for that, we think Tilly deserves some for sure. Next up, we have Reverend Karen Stroop, the Reverend at Arlen First Methodist throughout most of the series. Stroop is a well-meaning, albeit lonely woman. She shows compassion and respect towards others, including Bill, making her one of the very few love interests of his who actually seems to sincerely like him. She also insists on the community forgiving Cotton when he confesses, albeit wrongly, to burning down the church, and since Cotton made sexist remarks to her earlier and is a jerk in general, she gets extra points for her mercy there. Luann's not quite better half, Lucky, is up next. Lucky is an interesting case. While he is admittedly kind of a bum, he isn't a bad guy by any stretch. Yeah, he may prefer living off of PP slipping settlement money to getting a job, but he's made it clear that he's willing to do anything for the people he loves. From refusing to marry Luann before getting a GED, to refusing to let Bobby miss school even for a concert line, Lucky has a solid code of honor that takes priority over his more slothful tendencies. If Lucky had to get a job to support Luann and his baby, we don't doubt that he would, which keeps him squarely in the good category, and even prevents him from a sloth sinner medal. Next is Willow, Bobby's short-lived girlfriend in season 14. Oh no, not that kind of short-lived. She's alive, she just got dumped after a couple episodes. While Willow isn't a saint by any means and proved herself to be a teensy bit crazy by the end of her time in season 14, it's worth noting that poor judgment and mistakes do not a bad person make. Hey, that rhymed. Willow is a bit pushy, often overstepping boundaries with Bobby's family and barging in on what Bobby thought would be a father-son trip with Hank, but she's also genuinely friendly and sympathetic, offering Bobby emotional support over his struggles to connect with his dad, and coming off as a nice person in general. Unfortunately, she did also take a dump on the desk of her dad dad's former boss, and while she blamed him for her father's alcoholism, showing a twisted sense of love and justice for her father, it still shows that she has a bit of a crazy side. But as far as we know, Bobby still has both his kidneys intact, and that tells us that she was at least stable enough to take the breakup reasonably well. And rounding out the good category is Bobby's best friend, Joseph Gribble. Joseph truly is his father's son. As nosy and paranoid as he can be, when it matters most, Joseph is a friend you can count on. He's also just hopelessly naive, which also connects him to his old man. We'd argue that he's a lot more moral than Dale, though. Unlike what his old man does on a regular basis, Joseph never almost commits domestic terrorism or sabotages his neighbors' property or tries to convince kids to shoot pandas or anything. He's always friendly and well-meaning, whether it's doing pencil fights with Peggy during her stay at Bobby's apartment or offering him some misguided yet well-intentioned romantic advice. The only reason Joseph isn't any higher up is the same reason he earns a Lust Center medal. Joseph is a thirsty teenager at times and an outright horn dog at others, from hitting on MILFs at Bobby's catering events to trying to make out with Connie's mom while she's nursing his wounds. Joseph means well and always offers a listening ear to Bobby when he needs it, but his more pervy tendencies keep him on the lower end of the good category. But now it's time to venture into the more morally ambiguous characters. This is the gray area. Guess what? Chicken butt. Guess what else? Buckley is next. Buckley is far from the most memorable character in the series, only appearing for the first couple episodes as Luann's on and off again boyfriend. His borderline emotionless personality and lack of any real ambition earn him the Sloth Center medal. Luann constantly dumps him for ignoring and failing her in various ways, and if she weren't such a forgiving sweetheart, he would have lost her long before he lost himself in that big propane explosion. His slothfulness is also the reason he played a role in accidentally blowing up the Megalomart, which loses him a few points. But his angel did go through the trouble to visit Luann and help her move on from his death, which was really sweet and proved that underneath all of his indifference lies a good heart that did genuinely care. Placing Chuck Mangione up next feels so good, mainly because he's the official spokesperson of the Megalomart. A true enigma in the world of King of the Hill, he shows up to play at all sorts of events, from weddings to funerals, always transitioning into feels so good somehow, which feels a bit inappropriate at times, but I mean, you guys paid for Chuck Mangione, so of course you're gonna get him. While others may pay for Chuck, he himself is paying for his contract with the Megalomart, obligated to appear at every store opening, around 400 per year. He doesn't get much time for himself. Living in the Megalomart and chewing the security camera wires so he won't be detected is certainly weird, but in his case, it might just be the only way he's able to rest his head at night. This might be a hot take, or it might not, but either way, this time around we've decided to place Bill Daughter Eve in the gray area. Bill isn't a bad guy per se. He's pathetic, self-loathing, and relies on his friends to pull him out of pretty much any slump he lands himself into, but he has a genuinely good heart. In one episode, even when drunk out of his mind, he was willing to sacrifice his life so Hank and the other guys could escape an army artillery training base. He does a lot of kind things in the series, from acting as the neighborhood Santa to standing in extreme heat to wave at passing drivers to lift their spirits. It's clear as day, more than anything, Bill just wants to be seen as valuable to somebody, and that's totally valid. What isn't totally valid is the way he objectifies women, particularly Peggy, from stealing her used body cast from the garbage to trying to cozy up to her while Hank is out of town. Bill's friendship with Hank comes second to his lust for Peggy, and it's clear that he'd gladly throw him under the bus just for a single noodle of that spaghetti and meatballs. In one episode of season 14, he befriends an entire black barbershop by lying about being married to Peggy, essentially describing Hank as himself and Bill as Hank, which frankly is pretty insulting to Hank. It also earns Bill what may very well be the most pitiful Envy Center medal we've ever handed out. We feel for Bill's struggles with depression, divorce, and loneliness, but his self-loathing doesn't just affect him, it affects the people around him, and in pretty serious ways sometimes.
I might have let myself go a little.
Tack on his tendency to avoid accountability wherever possible, and you have a guy who may have a genuinely good heart, but still has more than enough bad traits to keep him from being fully heroic. But one thing's for sure, whether he's good or bad, Bill is a man who's always taking care of business. Stuart Dooley is next. He's brutally honest.
I pulled your pants down.
But he's also an ally. He makes us feel conflicted, but one thing's for sure, his chicken is the star of the show. Despite his name, Good Hank is more like Morally Gray Hank, if you ask us, for now at least. We aren't sure how he went from an infant to a teenager in only 8 years, but we do know one thing about GH. A mix of Cotton's misogyny and Dee Dee's total lack of parenting skills make GH a pretty unsavory teen. He's falling prey to some bad influences that are more or less convincing him that women are the cause of all of his life's woes. Hank is thankfully able to keep him on the straight and narrow, and while he's still got a long way to go, we should do something nice for our practice. It looks like Cotton's worst fear of him growing to be as much of a screw-up, meaning man who has any respect for women, as Hank are coming true. Too bad indeed, old man. The first lady among Hank's neighbors, Min, is up next. Min's character can more or less be described as Con, but slightly more tolerable. She has all of Con's good characteristics, like being a good parent to Connie and a generally law-abiding citizen, but she also has a slightly less severe variant of all his bad traits, like his arrogance and tendency to constantly demean others, especially Peggy, who she seems to usually consider a friend. She's just as much of a greedy social climber as Con, but she typically isn't willing to go quite as far as he does. In one episode, she joins Dale's gun club to try and get into Nine Rivers Country Club via their skeet shooting tournament, and despite the potential blow to her reputation, she claims the guys as her guests when they break in, sparing them from a possible arrest and allowing them to enjoy the fancy skeet shooting range. She also was surprisingly chill about Joseph smooching her that one time, so we think that she has a pretty long fuse. You might expect us to place Con a lot lower than Min, but well, you expected wrong, I guess. He's definitely a worse person than Min, don't get me wrong. The guy's a ruthless social climber who will step on anyone to get a higher position in life. But behind Con's hunger for power and position is a heart that genuinely loves his family and only wants them to have the most comfortable life they can. Con is always going to bat for Connie. In one episode, when he suspects that she's suicidal because of her lack of time to spend with Bobby, he insists on prioritizing Bobby time over anything else. Given how strict Con is at any given moment, that's a seriously major good deed that proves he loves his daughter way more than any social status, even if it doesn't entirely make up for the way he looks down on his neighbors. Unfortunately, he was only done dirty in the new season, and we don't just mean, frankly, the not great voice switch. Rather, we mean the fact that Con is officially divorced and living in his own garage. A fact that doesn't stop him and Min from holding a huge anniversary party to show the world that they're worthy of membership at Nine Rivers Country Club. He's still as hesitant as always to accept his hillbilly redneck neighbors' kindness, but he's also still nowhere near a criminal or an outright bad guy. He's just kind of a jerk, but he's a surprisingly multifaceted one, overcoming struggles both socially and mentally with his manic depression to try and make a better life for his family. Next, we have the final member of the main four, Dale Gribble.
I was wondering when you'd get around to me.
Dale may have a changed voice, rest in peace, but his absolute absurdity will never change. We need not mention the absolutely hilarious irony in his paranoia-driven observance towards literally everything, but his total obliviousness to his wife's years-long affair. That kind of naivete earns him the Darwin Center Medal. And before you bring up the theory that Dale actually knows about the affair, we're gonna treat that as a non-canon theory for now, since, let's be real, Dale would do way worse than keeping John from his son if he actually did know. In actuality, while Dale is absolutely insane, he's not keeping Joseph just to torture John Redcorn, though that could be part of it. Rather, he genuinely loves Joseph as his own. From giving him extra money for snacks at the theater, to offering to wrestle with him despite Joseph being capable of murdering him, even down to using what he thought could be his very last moments as a free man to advise him against giving away his virginity too soon in season 13. Dale has proven time and time again to be a loving father, even if he does a lot of stuff that threatens that reputation, like trying to get his boy to kill a panda bear to appease the popular kids. That's not to mention the stuff he does to Hank on a regular basis, from causing a cave-in under his house to sabotaging his lawn out of sheer spite. Dale always bounces back though, and he does take his job as an exterminator seriously, helping Bobby with his rat problem in season 14 despite some questionable methods. It's a toss-up whether Dale will be weirdly helpful or an absolute menace in any given episode, but he doesn't fit squarely into hero nor villain category. He's just a crazy guy trying to live by his ever inconsistent moral code. He's loyal to his family and friends, but he's also downright crazy and ruthless at times, which makes him the kind of character the gray area was made for. And now we have the character who, in my opinion, won Substitute Teacher of the Year 3 years in a row, Peggy Hill. First things first, Pride Center Medal. I assume there are no objections there, right? Good. Okay, now on to the explanation. Peggy is probably the character whose morals changed the most over the series. While earlier seasons portrayed her as the Hill family's voice of reason, being sensible and kind, albeit somewhat passive-aggressive at times, Peggy suffered a traumatic skydiving injury that made her into, depending on who you ask, either an insufferable narcissist or a slightly less insufferable narcissist who doubles as one of the funniest characters in the show. She does some pretty awful things due to her conceited nature. One of the most memorable examples being stealing Bobby's homemade Thanksgiving dinner because she was jealous that he was a better cook. There was also the time she taught Lucky the wrong information on his GED test simply because she didn't think he was good enough for Luann. But while she is incredibly full of herself, Peggy almost never means harm like in these two instances. Even her worst misdeeds are usually done with the intent of protecting her family. She's always willing to go to bat for Hank. In the Bobby Goes Nuts episode, she essentially bullies him back to teach him to not screw around with Hank. And in the episode where Cotton dies, she tells him off before his death and lies to Hank about his final words, telling him he'd finally admitted how much he loved his son. She's morally gray, for sure, but there's just too much familial love in her heart to call Peggy a bad person. Even Connie mentions in the reboot that talking to Peggy always made her feel better, so while she may be a raging narcissist, Peggy is still a loving mother, wife, and neighbor. She may occasionally, almost accidentally, poison the entire town with mustard gas, but she'll do what she needs to in order to clean up her messes, and at the end of the day, that's what matters most. Principal Moss is far from the most memorable character in the series. He's a bad enough principal to remember, generally failing to protect his students when it matters most, but he isn't bad enough to qualify as an outright malicious guy. He's just incompetent and kind of pitiful, to the point where his hall monitor Emily genuinely seems like she could do his job better at times. We also feel like we should mention the occasional bully character Clark Peters. He isn't really that important in any particular episode, but guys, what the hell is that haircut? It's one thing to be a bully, but to have the audacity to be a bully with that thing on your head. This guy should frankly be in the bad category for that sin alone, but he can be friendly at times, so we'll show him some mercy. We aren't gonna be quoting that Twig Boy at ya, but we will be placing him next in the gray area. A social worker from Los Angeles, Twig Boy often takes matters into his own hands, which isn't good for a social worker to do. He all but harasses the Hills in the pilot episode, nearly taking custody of Bobby for some pretty normal familial arguments, and in another episode he basically forces Hank to keep a malicious drug addict on the team at Strickland Propane, despite him clearly taking advantage of the legal system. Twig Boy's willingness to go to bat for those he perceives as vulnerable people is good, but he's also willing to hurt honest, hardworking people and families in the process. He's morally neutral at best and a straight-up enabler at worst. Next up is Dee Dee Hill, the former kindergarten classmate of Hank and wife of his elderly veteran father. It's sad enough that Dee Dee fell for a man as awful as Cotton, but it's made even worse by her miserable failure as a parent. Not only did she place all the burden of caring for GH during infancy on Bobby, who, as he reasserts, is a 12-year-old boy, we see that she isn't any better by season 14. Rather than trying to improve as a parent, she dumps him on Hank for a few weeks over the summer so he can have a positive male role model in his life. Dee Dee isn't a bad person, but she's a pitiful mother who depends on others way too much. Instead, we'll say she narrowly misses out on the final category of the day. Get ready for a clean burning hell, I tell you what, because we're entering the bad to evil. We had to rank John Redcorn in the top of the bad category, since he's partially responsible for one of the most frustrating, albeit hilarious subplots of the series, Nancy's affair with him. While John Redcorn isn't as culpable in the affair as Nancy, we'd argue that at times he can be worse. In one episode from the original seasons, he tried to seduce Nancy into another affair long after they stopped seeing each other, and after he initially cut it out because he saw Dale as a true friend. Not only is he continuing his habit of home-wrecking, he's betraying someone he supposedly considers his friend.
We worked late and my hair got mussed by a branch of a tree.
That said, when he isn't being a lying scoundrel, John does some good deeds. Playing wholesome songs for little kids isn't enough to make up for his misdeeds, but it's enough to show that he has some degree of kindness in his heart, so we won't place him any lower. And Redcorn, despite his moral flaws, has a lot of inner struggles that make us feel for him. You might even say he has dusty old bones, full of green dust. At least Hank's personal buddy Caleb would say that. Look, we don't entirely blame Caleb's behavior on him. Having parents who excuse him blatantly tormenting a middle-aged man as, "It just means he likes you," can't make forming better habits very easy. We don't want to say that he's still a bully 8 years later, since he's probably mellowed out, but for the one episode we saw him in, he was really annoying. First up, what can we say about Jimmy Witchard? Well, a few things. One, he's the boss.
You're the boss, Jimmy. I'm the boss.
Two, he's not a very good one. While we have to give Jimmy some leeway since he clearly isn't all there, that doesn't excuse his tendency to abuse and endanger the people around him. In one classic episode when Bobby gets a job working under Witchard, he not only extorts Bobby out of almost all of his pay, he orders him to cross a busy racetrack to bring him a soda just because it's faster. General Gum is one of many awful parental figures in King of the Hill, but ironically his performance as a parent is still somehow his best trait. He seems to be a genuinely loving father to Min, always bringing back thoughtful gifts from his trips. Unfortunately, he's also a complete jerk to Khan, refusing to accept him as his son-in-law no matter how hard Khan is trying. It gets to the point where General Gum takes a spotlight from Khan as he's singing karaoke, something he genuinely loved doing and was good at. While Gum did love his daughter enough to leave her be, that doesn't make up for how he treated Khan. Khan. It just shows that he loved Min more than he hated Khan, I guess. Bobby's bully slash romantic rival turned boss slash romantic rival, Chain Wasanasong, is up next. The son of one of the highest ranking Nine Rivers Country Club members, it's not hard to see why Khan wanted to see Connie fall for him. Unfortunately for Connie, this actually worked for a while. Chain managed to talk her into ethical non-monogamy, a relationship practice that, by Chain's definition, meant he could bring whoever he wanted without worrying about all those silly things like emotions and actual relationships. He's also a Nepo baby who treats everyone around him as being beneath him, constantly putting Bobby down despite Bobby being genuinely compassionate towards him. And we think the bulk of responsibility for that lies with Ted Wasanasong. Ted and his wife are basically Khan and Min, but much worse. Whereas Khan and Min seem to just want comfier lives, Ted is a total hypocrite who's already made it to the top and spends his days demeaning others, taking advantage of the vulnerable and doing whatever brings him the most profit and pleasure at any given moment. Being an arrogant money grubber is bad already, but being on such a high horse while doing it is just worse. Ted is basically Khan minus all of Khan's good attributes, landing him squarely in our bad category. Next up is a character we feel like we're placing too high and too low at the same time, Cotton Hill. Cotton is a decorated war veteran who lost his shins. Of course, 50 men lost their lives in exchange, so it wasn't the worst trade deal out there. It's questionable enough that Cotton is so proud of the amount of people he killed, but that's without taking everything else about him into account. Cotton notoriously treats women horribly. He probably has illegitimate kids everywhere, and that's not to mention his absolutely horrible emotional abuse of his wife and son, to the point where he even named his second son Good Hank to hammer in how much he detests Hank, regular Hank, the first Hank. There's absolutely nothing forgivable about the way Cotton treats Hank. The only truly kind thing he ever said to him was admitting that Hank was a better father since he made Bobby instead of Hank. Honestly, I can't help but feel like Cotton deserves the Rat Center Medal for the amount of sheer hatred he has for his own son. That said, Cotton isn't all bad. Mostly bad by a pretty significant margin. Yeah, absolutely, but he does have his sympathetic qualities. In one episode, he starts to feel genuine remorse for what he did to the Japanese in the war. In another, he helps Peggy learn how to walk again after her skydiving accident. And in several others, he proves that he genuinely loves Bobby. While he's a bad influence on him more often than not, there are some moments where Cotton shows a willingness to sacrifice himself for Bobby's sake. Most notably was in the episode Revenge of the Lutefisk, in which he took the blame for burning down Hank's church, even though it was Bobby who did it on accident. Oh, and did I mention he also killed 50 men? But next up is Nancy Hicks Gribble. It's a shame we have to place Nancy solo because on paper she has a lot more redeeming qualities than Cotton. She's a decent mother to Joseph, usually a good friend to Peggy and Min, and typically a law-abiding citizen. In the later seasons of the show's original run, she even seems to stop her affair with John Redcorn, and while that isn't as good as taking accountability for her actions, it's better than doing nothing at all to address them. But even if we ignore her cheating on her husband for years with almost no remorse, which we aren't, to be clear, Nancy still has two particular traits that keep her low on our list. First and foremost, in the new season, John Redcorn has one line that heavily implies he and Nancy are still sleeping together, commenting that he has been giving it to her for some time.
I've been giving it to Nancy for quite some time.
Even if we assume the best, and John was just giving her some of his new snack, Nancy is still a cutthroat, power-hungry woman. In Nancy Does Dallas, she takes a job offer as a news anchor in Dallas, only to immediately start plotting to overthrow her co-anchors so she can take over on her own. Without Dale's antics to keep her in check, Nancy goes from an unfaithful wife, which is awful, to a borderline supervillain. Now, while Ted rejecting a Khan from Nine Rivers hurts, one rejection in the series left more of a painful impact. Lenore. Say what you will about Nancy. Seriously, I won't stop you. But she's nowhere near as awful as Lenore. It's clear to see how bad she is just by how badly she screwed up Bill. Over the course of the series, we get bits and pieces of information about Lenore and how awful she is. From cheating on Bill as early as 2 weeks into their marriage, to verbally abusing him when they finally rekindle, Lenore just doesn't have any good qualities. But now it's time for us to talk about the last fully new character on our list. Eli Selwick is a one-off antagonist in the episode that sees GH make his grand return, and he essentially acts as an Andrew Tate parody. He runs one of those alpha male boot camps, and it's clear from GH's impression of him that he's capable of taking serious advantage of vulnerable, hurting men. It's bad enough to make your living off of siphoning money out of insecure, emotionally vulnerable men, all the while convincing them that all of their problems are caused by females! But imagine having the audacity to be such a slimeball towards women knowing full well
வணக்கம் ஃப்ரெண்ட்ஸ், இன்னைக்கு நம்ம சொல் உருவாக்குதல் பார்க்குறோம். வாங்க கண்டுபிடிச்சு ஆன்சர் பண்ணலாம். ஓகே, ஃபர்ஸ்ட் ஒன் பேயின் பெண். சண்டு. Number 2, say. Number 3, செய்மை. செய்மை. Number 4, வெண்மை. Number 5, பெண்மை. Number 6, high craft. High. சொல்லு உருவாக்குங்க. காயின் கண். ஹாய் ஹாய். நெக்ஸ்ட் யார் இருக்கா? பெண்மை, வெண்மை, சேய்மை, சேய், பெண், கண். சூப்பர் சூப்பர். அப்படியே ஆன்சர் கண்டுபிடிச்சு சொல்லுங்க. சூப்பர். அம்மா. ஆ இம் மா. நம்பர் 8, தாய். தாய். நம்பர் 9, கருமை. 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 நம்பர் 10, பெருமை. பெருமை, எடு, எருமை, நம்பர் மாடு, நம்பர் 14, கடமை, கண்மை, கண்மை, அருமை, எண்ணுமை, எண்ணுமை, தாய்மை, மை, ஒரு சொல், ஓரெழுத்து ஒரு சொல்ல வரும் மை, தா, 21, மா, 22, நீங்களும் கண்டுபிடிச்சு ஆன்சர் பண்ணுங்க. 22 யாரும் கண்டுபிடிச்சு சொல்கிறீங்களா மாப்பா? எம்எஸ்வி கேமிங் வராது, அந்த வார்த்தை வராது. துணைக்கல் வரும். ஓகே, ஓகே. 21ஓட ஃபைன். வேறு யார் கண்டுபிடிச்சி சொல்கிறீங்களா? அண்டம்ன்றது உலகம். கடம். Okay friends, thank you.